Hey, everybody, welcome. Really excited to talk today because this is one of those topics that I think is unbelievably important and ignored and missed a lot of the time. And you can't ever do it justice in a short form piece of content. What I'm going to be talking about are the things you don't see. And what I'm going to be talking about are I'm going to be giving a few examples of very inspirational stories. I'm going to remove the name of the person, but a few very inspirational stories. And specifically, I'm going to talk about the things you don't see in these stories and why, while this is still an inspirational story, it's a really fucking bad example for you to follow. So Charlie Munger, the famous investor, Warren Buffett's partner, one of his most famous lines and principles is invert. Always invert. Turn a situation or problem upside down. Look at it backwards. That is probably the single most useful piece of advice that you could have. And so, because what that allows you to do is it allows you to see the situation from a different angle and allows you to see things you wouldn't otherwise see. So I'm going to give these couple examples. One of them is a podcast, one of them is a membership site. But what I'm going to start with is something as simple as a sales call and the importance of inverting a question on a sales call. So most of the time when we're selling coaching, what we'll do is we'll say to the person, hey, why do you want to do this? Why is this important to you? A good question. But think about that question if you invert it. In fact, I think the most important question you could ever ask on a sales call is, why not do this on your own? Why not? Why not stay exactly where you're at right now? Like, what do you think would happen if you didn't sign up? What do you think would happen if you didn't do this? Let's play like you cool to play a game with me right now? Are you cool to explore this a little bit with me right now? Like in a fantasy world, what would happen if you don't do this? And so in inverting that question, what you're doing is you're creating tension. And I think that, tell me where this lands with you guys. I think that coaches sell with tension, not tactics. Because I think that change is really uncomfortable for everybody. And dial down a sales conversation is actually a change conversation. And the most important thing that you kind of need to help a person that you're speaking to on the phone answer is why you and why now. And it's not like witty comebacks you need. It's really curiosity. And you're not a salesperson, you're a coach. And so that idea, tell me how that lands for you first, like that idea of coaches sell with tension, not tactics. And you're not manufacturing tension. I want to be clear about this. What you're doing is you're illuminating the tension that already exists in the client's mind. And you're making sure that they recognize that tension that exists.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, one thing that I talk to our students about in the Online Trainer Academy is framing the call. And one of the reasons that I talk to them about framing their sales call initially, even if it's like an audition call, some coaches will use an audition call. And for those out there listening, that just means you're trying to feel out the potential client. It's not always necessary, right. But in that case, when you frame, one of the pieces that I use to frame the call is the line of, hey, I'm just going to get a little information from you, make sure I understand you. And if I feel like I cannot help you, I'll be sure to let you know that. Right. And that's a setup for tension later.
You just
frame it up. Yeah. That's a setup for tension later, because after I give the most brilliant summary that anybody's ever gotten and make them feel the most listened to that they've ever felt in their entire lives, and they say, oh my gosh, you're such a good listener. I'll say, so I do have an understanding of what your situation is like now. They say, oh my gosh, yeah, you're an amazing listener. I'll say, hey, you remember earlier when I said if I could not help you, I'd let you know that? And I will pause for a little bit of that attention.
Right.
And they'll usually say, yeah. And then typically I'll say, oh, great news. Right. But we needed to feel that tension. And probably the most important tension in the context of a sales call is at the closing of the sales call. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to present whatever that number is and present a choice and be quiet, because there's tension there. The professional can endure the tension. Typically, the potential client, they've never been put in a situation where they've been made to feel that tension of change and making that decision. But if I interject without allowing them the discomfort of the tension, it's very unlikely that they are going, well, I won't say that, but I'm reducing the likelihood of them enrolling, because I need them to meet, feel, and respond to that tension of, so you've got two choices. Option A, you pay 3 monthly payments of blah, blah, blah. Option B, one upfront payment of blah, blah, blah. Which one works best for you? You never got to be quiet. And we've got to rest in that tension. So I love the idea of tension, not tactic.
Yeah. And it's not that tension's a bad thing. Like I'm a little bit hesitant. Like I would never use the word in like a short form piece, because I think you do need to talk about it a little bit. I think, so I was writing some of this section today for the book, and the way the line that I said is, the best coaches are curious, confident skeptics, because you kind of need to call a client out on their shit. And in order to do that, you kind of need to be confident enough to call yourself out on your own shit. Oftentimes, coaches have a hard time going deep with clients because they have self-limiting beliefs. And because of their own self-limiting beliefs, they don't go as deep with the client that they otherwise would need to. And so if you can never go deep enough with a client, then you're not going to have a good time. You're not going to be able to train them. And even if you do convince them to train with you, you're not starting off on the right foot. And you need to be a skeptic, because you need to kind of question what they say, because a lot of the time they're going to lie to your face.
Well, that was a period. Yeah, this is true. As John rises like Jesus, Nathers. So this is true, and I'll talk to Amber about it behind John's back, because that's what I like to do. So Amber, I had an enrollment call with a coach last week. It was my enrollment week. I had an enrollment call with a coach, and her decision at the end of the call was that it was a little bit too pricey. There was some international exchange of money. So she was like, oh, that's US dollars. I was like, yeah, it's US dollars. So John, to bring you up to speed, I'm just telling Amber, I had a call with a coach last week during my enrollment week, follows the show, international coach, who was going to, she's like, I need some coaching, Rand. I love. So I go through the enrollment, and she decides that it's a bit too pricey for her. She's an international person, adjusting for US dollars, et cetera, et cetera. To which I was like, I completely understand. She said, well, I tell you what, send me the information, let me know. And this coach I had to re-engage with for her to say no. And right away, I thought two things. Number one, I should have been able to resolve that during the enrollment call. But number two, there's some limiting beliefs here that I'm definitely sure show up in your coaching practice as a business person. Based on not based on you deciding that it wasn't affordable, but based on you not being direct in the communication about thinking that it's outside of budget, right? So I know that I feel confident that if I had a conversation with this coach about business coaching, one of the things that we would need to get past is the amount that she's charging for her programs. It's probably underselling pretty consistently, and maybe fearful of increasing the price.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the time, a lot of what we deal with on a sales call, and I don't want to dwell on sales calls too much, because I really want to get to the inversion bit. And this is just kind of an example of the inversion bit. Right. Because we're going to talk about sales a lot more in the coming weeks, because as I'm writing the sections, we're just going to go super deep into it. But one of the things that I think is really important in a sales call is to be skeptical in order to identify lies that often the client is telling themselves and also telling you, to kind of overcome challenging change conversations. Like, change conversations are very awkward. They're very difficult. And one of the things that we do when we feel awkward in very difficult situations is we kind of lie. And so you have to be skeptical to that. And so one of the things that you could do when, right, on your sales calls, and I'm not going to give you sales advice, you're good at sales, but one of the things that you could do on your sales calls is you'd kind of gauge like how the client's feeling, if you would need to do this or not. But after asking them a whole bunch of questions and shutting your, the hole underneath your nose, just closing that for a little while, right? Which we all need to do a little bit more of. After we do that, what you do is you reiterate back to them, you paraphrase back to them what they said to you. And then you say, does that land? Does that sound like, I just want to make sure that I really understand. They say, yeah. And then I would just kind of take a step back and I would just say, okay, so why not do this on your own? And then I would just, and it matters why you say that. And also the tonality of how you ask the questions matters too. Like if you were to say to somebody, why is that important to you now? Which word you put emphasis on matters. If you were to be like, why is that important to you now? Well, then you're emphasizing the why. So they're going to talk about why it's important. If you say, why is that important to you right now? Well, then they're going to talk about the importance. If you say, why is that important to you right now? Then they're going to talk to you about the timeliness aspect of it. And so this is like sales 202, 303, 404. I mean, I'm not saying you probably don't need to focus on that, but you understand the tonality of how you say things really, really matters. Okay, can we move on to the next part? Because I'm really excited to talk about this.
Do it.
Do it. Oh, I didn't tease the end yet. Okay, stay to the end of the episode because we got a request for somebody to sponsor this podcast, and it's the funniest, silliest request ever, just because of how little they clearly know me, because I think their product is a complete joke. And
have not listened to the podcast at all.
And so what Ren did is that Ren actually created a fake ad for them. And I don't know what it is, but he's going to read it at the end of the episode. Okay. So I heard a presentation last week. And in this presentation, the presenter shared, I'm going to omit the names on purpose. In this presentation, the presenter shared an incredibly inspirational story of a podcaster. This is outside of the fitness industry. And this podcaster, the first year of his podcast, had 50 downloads. And the second year of his podcast had 50 downloads. And by the fifth year, he was getting 500 downloads, just 500 downloads. But by year 7, he was up to 1 million.
Sheesh.
What an incredible story about perseverance, about believing, about vision, right? And it's inspirational. Let's talk about what's not included in that story. It is being remarked upon. It's remarkable, which is why we're mentioning it, which is why we are remarking on it, which by definition means that it's not normal and it's not usual, number one. Not to say it can't happen. Number two, are you willing to work for 6 years, 5 to 10 hours a week or more, recording a podcast for literally nothing, no rewards in terms of money or acclaim or audience or following, in the hopes that something's going to happen? And this is how exponential curves work, right? Like your stuff's bubbling underneath the surface and you hit an inflection point and you zoom up. Like that's how it works. I get that. But are you willing to put in that work for 6 years? Is that the most important thing for you to do based off of your goals? My guess is that in 99.99999% of the cases, there's no fucking way. And so I tell this because I was listening to this story in this presentation and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so inspired to just keep at it. But then I was like, that's a really dangerous story to tell as a presenter, to a whole bunch of people who are up and coming in the industry who are trying to build businesses for themselves because of all the things that aren't in it. And so that's the first story, is this podcast, and is just, okay, well, let's invert this. Let's think about what's not being said here, because we hear all these inspirational stories all the time, don't we? My favorite one is during the crypto boom, whenever it was, year and a half, 2 years ago, when Dogecoin was pumping. And there was this guy who was nicknamed the Dogecoin millionaire, who invested his life savings, $200 and some thousand into Doge, because he knew it was going to jump up. Well, how did he know it was going to jump up? Oh, Elon was tweeting about it, and so I just knew that it was going to go up. And it did. And so he's on every news station, and this guy made over $1 million on this bet that he made. And oh my God, how did he know? And he's so smart. It's like, no, actually, what happened was he made a dumb fuck decision. And it worked out for him, which sometimes happens if you make a dumb fuck decision. Because if you make a really, really bad decision, you might have a 10% chance of success. That means that 1 in 10 times you're going to hit it. If you make a really good decision, I mean, invert that. The best investors on the planet have about a 60 to 65% success rate. They are the literal best decision makers on the planet. And they have a 60, 65% success rate, which means, invert this, 4 out of 10 times, they're wrong. Here's the thing, though. In a quick hit, dopamine-induced, sensationalistic media environment that we live in, you hear about the sensational stuff, and it makes you kind of feel like either you missed out or they knew something you didn't. Whereas the reality of it is that the world is actually just very unpredictable. And even somebody who makes a really bad decision, it sometimes works out for them. And those are actually quite often the stories that you're going to hear. And it's really important to take a step back and say, what else might be going on here? And then also and here's a fun exercise for you, follow these people. Because the Dogecoin millionaire is broke as a joke right now. Because what happens when somebody makes a dumb fuck decision? They're going to keep making dumb fuck decisions. And somebody who makes a really bad decision and it works out for them, great. Odds are they're not going to stop there. This is why casinos, when you win, give you a free room. They're not stupid. And so, of course, this guy kept his Doge. He didn't sell. He didn't, glide off into the, whatever it is, into the sunset and be like, oh my God, I won. He just kept making bad decisions, and now he's broke. And if you follow a lot of business people or coaches or anything that are like super, super in vogue very, very fast, and you're kind of like, where did they come from? And you look at what they're doing, and they're either marketing themselves on some sort of gimmick, or they're like business people, and they just like made this big bet, and people are like, oh my God, how did you know? It's like, odds are they didn't. Odds are they took a shot in the dark and it worked out, because what very often happens is that same person is basically gone a few years later, versus this much more sustainable model of that we teach, with the obvious choice model that we talk about in this podcast over and over and over again. Okay, I got another example that I'll get to in a minute, but I want to hear you guys' reaction to that, because the other example is about a membership site and somebody who has a very big membership site now. And I want to talk about the stuff you don't see in them building up that membership site, because you look at this person now and everybody's like, oh my God, he's amazing. He must have the stuff figured out. It's like, no, actually, he lived a terrible life for like 7 years. Okay, let's talk about the podcast first. What are your reactions here?
Amber, shall you go? I've got some thoughts.
You go first.
Yeah, so this is important because in the age of information, it's so easy to see a little bit of information and writing a complete story in your mind about what the information is telling you and be absolutely incorrect about it. I see that daily because of the population that I serve, right? Oh, I want to be Ren, this woman is body goals. And I'm like, well, give her 2 years to come out and say that her marriage was failing at the time. She was the leanest, her hair was falling out. She had no sex drive and she felt miserable. Like, just give it a couple of years, because I've seen this play out so many times. And there's not in the flash in the pan that is social media, there's rarely nuance or context, right? It's just the show, right? You don't know that the microphone stands were taped together. You don't know that one of the performers is wearing a size that's too big in their shoes. You know, they're hoping they keep their shoe on them. You just see the magic, right?
You just see the magic there.
You don't
see all the stuff. There's always this. I mean, I can show you. We've taken photos sometimes of like video shoots that I've done, where you know, in the frame is perfect. You know, the lighting's great, the background's perfect, everything, and then you just like you take 2 steps back and it's just chaos. Just
zoom
chaos.
out.
But that's not in frame.
It's not in frame. Oh,
that's a really good analogy.
I was about to say that it's not in frame. That's a very clever way of saying it. Amber, your thoughts?
So I wasn't sure which direction you were wanting to go with that. So I needed context, because I had 2 different kind of paths that I took from that. So one of which is that in order for anything to happen, you have to be around long enough for it to happen. And you have to have like the gumption to do that. Doesn't mean it'll happen. But the odds of it happening go up by being there. And that's what happened.
The odds of it go up by being there, but you can't. I think that's a very good point. And I want to dwell on it for a second, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. Because before you move on, because I want to hear what else you have to say too, because you guys are both adding gold to this. So this is why I keep a notebook. In frame versus out of frame. It's on the notebook. Nice. I used it for the first time, basically. The odds of it happening go up. And I think that's notable. Like this guy who had this podcast, like the odds of the success went up because he kept at it. But you can't assume that it's going to happen.
And you have to know when to pull.
And you have to, that's what she said. And you have to plan for leakage. You have to plan for it not working.
That's what she said. Sorry. You started
I'm wildly entertained by this. Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan.
And so when you're doing that, if you decide like, and like, this is not me saying that you shouldn't follow that path, because podcasts are really hard to grow, especially if you don't have an audience to start with. Like podcasts are really hard to grow. Like it might take that long to grow, maybe not quite that long, but like it's going to take a long time to grow it to be anything meaningful if you want to be a podcaster, right? And that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you need to make a couple bucks to make ends meet right now, that's probably not going to be your path. And so it's understanding what the game is that you're playing. It's understanding what the rules of engagement are within that game, and what the rewards are, and what the timelines are, and what the success rates are. And taking, play the lottery. You know that the odds of winning are like 1 in 200 million or whatever they are for like the Powerball lottery. But like when you play the lottery, you know that that's the odds of winning. You accept that. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's just important when you listen to these types of inspirational stories, it's important to understand the stuff that's not said so that you better understand the rules of engagement that are part of that story. That's said horribly. I could have brought that around so much better. Go ahead, Amber. Right. What's the second part that you want to say?
So you ever like go out shopping or whatever, and there's somebody that's begging for money, right? And a lot of people will say, well, don't give them money, right? Or lend money to a friend or whoever, right? And the quote that often comes up is, don't give away something that you're not willing to lose. And so this to me is very similar, right? So if you're going to go down a path like doing a podcast or something that may take up a lot of time, make sure that you're willing to give it up regardless of the outcome, right? You can't control the outcome, but you have to be willing to lose whatever the investment is that you have to make. So whether that's time, money, whatever, right? So if you're going to go down that path, be prepared to give it up long-term if need be.
So I had a very fascinating conversation with a social worker friend of mine years back. That's always stuck in my mind. One of the things she said was that a lot of people don't like giving money to homeless because they say, oh, they're just going to spend it on alcohol and cigarettes.
So what?
And number one, so what? But what she also said was, here's the reality of the situation. These people are often very cold, and alcohol makes them feel warm. These people are often very hungry, and cigarettes dull their hunger. This is what you don't see. Here's another example of inverting this problem. You guys just threw out some gold. Anything else on the podcast example before we get to the membership one?
That's it.
No? All right.
No.
Membership one. This one's my favorite.
We know how much you love memberships.
Well, it's not even that I love them or don't love them. I think it is such a prime example of what you don't see matters so much more than what you do see. And the realities of a membership site are so damaging to so many people who do them based off of a whole bunch of really bad math and really bad assumptions. And so, okay, so there's somebody in our industry who runs a really, really profitable membership site. Like I don't know how much he makes, but it's a couple $1 million a year easy, right? And he has one of the biggest social media followings out there as well. Here's what you don't see as part of this story. I'm going to hide a few elements of it because I don't want to out who he is, and a few of the elements would really out it. So know that there's more to this story that even make my argument stronger, but I'm not sharing them on purpose. This guy, for 5 years, I'm not exaggerating, it was 5 years, spent 8 hours a day on Instagram. His health went to shit, complete shit. Like, he'll post pictures of himself during that time. And so his health went to shit. All of his, like, not just like his weight and everything, like all of his health markers were terrible, like really, really bad. He ruined just about every friendship and family tie that he had because he was just so obsessed with growing this at the time. And to build up his social media, to spend all the time building up his social media. And then when he started the membership site, his first launch, so even with all of this, even with a huge social media following, when he started the membership site, it was $1 first for the members, and he got about 100 members, and then it went down to 40. And then he eventually was able to grow it to 200 members, then down to 100 members over the first 6. And now, 5 years into that membership site, the thing's cranking along. Okay, here's what you don't see with this, right? In order for this person to get himself to the position that he's in right now, he had to give up a lot. Now, he's very honest about his story, and he doesn't regret it. I mean, it's a part of his life. He's a super smart guy. He doesn't regret it, and he's in a very fortunate position now. And so my question to you is, knowing that, and knowing that there's also more to the story that basically make it impossible to recreate, and to the point where, like, there's not even any point in really even learning about how he did it because of these other elements of the story. Like they're just like, you guys know who I'm talking about. You can back me up on this. There's not even any point in trying to recreate what he did or learning about the tactical aspects of what he did because of these other elements of the story. It's just impossible. And I'll kind of leave it at that. And I don't know, and like, you know who it is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's just like, you just couldn't do it.
Right.
Knowing that, would you be willing to trade what you have in your life for his? If I were to say to you, starting in 2012, you will give up for 5 years your health, your friendships, your social life, and your family life, and spend 8 hours a day on Instagram and writing content. It wasn't just Instagram. And writing content so that you can start a membership site that for the first few years, I actually don't know the details of when the membership site started to do well, but for the first few years, kind of like had a hard time getting going, so that in 2023, you'd be in a very admired position where people look up to you as a top content creator, and you have this membership site that my guess is makes a few $1 million. Would you be willing to do that? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I think it's really fucking important to understand all of the elements of what goes into this before deciding that you want to kind of follow that path. That's what I got.
I think most people don't understand. Let me rephrase. I think it's important to understand the reality of the circumstances before you begin to admire the end result, right? And that's where people get caught up. Your buddy, old JC, old Jimmy Clear, had a quote in the Atomic Habits there, something to the effect of to be in love with the desired outcome, but not in love with the process is to guarantee consistent disappointment, right? And I think that happens often.
He's so wise, that guy.
I mean,
he's so wise.
It's annoyingly so, John.
Yeah.
I pick up a Jonathan Goodman book and I just think to myself, how would James Clear say this? And then I really get the impetus of what the point was.
So much.
I could not say it, but in any case, but that's true. Like, we've got people all over this planet that are in head over heels in love with some result, based on a process that they either don't understand or actively would not participate in at any level of willingness, and they're miserable because of it, because they want it so bad, but there's no way in hell they're doing any of the. One of the last situations that I had at my previous employment was I had gone to the national convention for the organization, right? Qualified as a manager for the national convention. When convention come back, of course, in a sales environment like that, they want you to show off about how good the convention was. Ren just came back from convention, got, get the salespeople worked up, it frothed up, so they can be all. And they talked about one of the ladies at convention who was in New Zealand, and she was doing sales with her husband. So they just literally didn't go home. They stayed in the car out on the streets of New Zealand. She peed in bathrooms at local gas stations, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, she's the #1 salesperson internationally in the company. And I got up right after that presentation. I said, yeah, she's amazing. I'm not willing to do that. Right. And it really pissed off the higher ups. I'm not peeing in no damn gas station, man, and changing.
Yeah, that's what they make. That's what they make Doritos bags for. Right. So why? So let me tell you one other thing from this event. So I was at an event called Raise the Bar, which was really fantastic. Derek and Nick, shout out to you guys. You guys were in a phenomenal event. And here's another thing that I noticed, that if you look at what was missing, you will realize the speakers were phenomenal. I mean, almost across the board, the speakers were very, 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 very good. And it was a mixture of fitness and business. And there was actually a fair bit on like customer service, and Lee Boyce gave a good talk on the soft sides of coaching. Kevin Carr gave what I think was from Boyle Strength Conditioning, gave what I think was the best talk of the event, was on customer service. It was really, really quite well done. But here's what I noticed. Almost across the board, none of the speakers had kids. And many of them were in their 30s or 40s and like probably won't ever have kids. I mean, you know, they've just decided that that's not right for them, which again, totally cool. But when you're listening to them and you're listening about the funnels and how they're funneling people and all of the content that they're creating in this ascension model and all of the amazing things that they're doing in order to market and create content and this and this and this, I think it's really important to recognize just what's missing. And there's nothing wrong with it. I want to be so clear. But it's a really important data point. And so in consuming advice or admiring people and what they do and learning from them, it doesn't mean you can't learn from them. But you have to understand that if your personal situation is so different from theirs, you might not be able to do all of what they do. You know what my day's like? I was woken up 7 times overnight last night. Okay, number one. We showed up at our workout this morning 10 minutes late because Calvin was up so much last night. Couldn't get him out of bed. I got back here, so I stayed out at a coffee shop after the workout and wrote. I got back here 40 minutes before I had a call just before this podcast. And our nanny was here with both kids. Jaden was sleeping, Calvin was here, and I was trying to prepare for my calls, and Calvin wanted to play with me, which is like, if you work and you have a child who you love more than anything in the world, and they want to play with you, and you have to say to them, no, daddy's got to work, that is the worst feeling in the world. And then Jaden finally woke up, and the nanny took the 2 kids like 3 minutes before my call started. Do you think I was mentally prepared as I'd like to be for those calls? We're going to finish this podcast. I have about 45 minutes where I'm going to try to get a little bit more work done. And then I'm all in with my family until I go to bed. Well, I can't build multi-step funnels right now, dude. It's just, what did I do before I had kids? I woke up in the morning. My coffee was already ready because I had it on a timer. And I sat down with my coffee and I opened my computer and I basically worked straight until I had to piss.
Always have to pee.
And I'd eat lunch by my computer and I'd eat dinner by my computer. And I'd think about the stuff going to sleep and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd do it again.
It was your kid. I mean, realistically, it was your kid, your relationship. That's where all the energy is, right? Or what it was going to.
So I think I should look at actually the presenter list. It'd be interesting. I'm going to do it as we're talking.
Just to see.
Yeah, just to see.
Who's got the kids?
Just to see how many people had kids or didn't have kids. And again, like, I cannot reiterate this enough. It's a data point.
Right.
But you have to understand that it's a really important data point. Okay, so 3. So he has a kid. He has a kid. So that's 2, 3. Okay. So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, out of the 14 speakers, 3 had kids.
And are they men or women? Let's add that data point.
Yeah.
One's a woman.
Okay.
One's a woman.
Okay.
2 are men. I mean, one of them is me.
Yeah.
So
No,
if you take
well,
me
yeah.
out of it,
okay.
there's
Figured.
one.
Well, that's important for
Well,
me to know.
so, and here's the other thing. One of them, I mean, Tony and Lisa, right? So Tony
Hmm.
Gentlecore, Dr. Lisa Lewis. So they're married. So they have a kid. So actually, if you count them
Combine
as
them.
one,
Oh,
if
wait,
you
they're
count
a
them as
couple?
one, if you count them as one and eliminate me, one of the speakers, Martin Rooney, is the only one with a kid. None of the other speakers have children. Holy shit.
That's important to note.
Isn't that important to consider
Yes.
when you're listening to people you admire speak on stage about how they do what they do?
Yes.
This is why it's so important to focus on what you don't see. And not that it doesn't mean that you can't get anything from these people. Their advice was really, really good.
Right.
But you gotta have that data point in there
Context.
in order to appreciate it. Okay, I want to get to Adwen, but before we do that, there's one quick story that I want to call that's kind of unrelated, but it's just a really, really cool story that I want to add in. And actually, it's kind of, I can kind of segue it into this topic,
Okay,
but
all
it's
right,
kind of like a stretch.
That's fine. That's fine.
So Jackson came up to me at the event, at this Raise the Bar event, and he was like, yo, I don't know if you remember the story that I told you, but basically, like, I listened to your podcast, and he listened to all of our episodes. So shout out, Jackson. This is for you, man.
What's up, Jackson?
What's up, Jackson? And so one of the things that he told me was, hey, I was listening to your podcast, and one of the things you said is to never, if you're in the gym, never look bored, never be by yourself in the gym. Like, either be in the back room by yourself, right? But never be on the gym floor, like, looking bored. Like, just kind of like figure out a reason to talk to people. And so he's like, yeah, the club that I'm at has pickleball courts. And I noticed that there was a member there. He was a man who didn't have a partner for that day. And so normally I would have just like been on my phone, like creating content or whatever, just like doing a doom scroll on it. But I had that like in the back of my mind. So I went up and asked him if he wanted to play. And we played pickleball for half an hour. Okay. So that, and he's just like, and he's like, this guy was just lit up.
That's awesome.
So that was what I felt was the end of the story. So Jackson told me what happened next. This man and his wife have been clients of Jackson ever since. They've spent over $4,000 in training.
Wow.
This man is the single biggest referrer for the pickleball club at Jackson's club.
Wow.
And none of this would have happened, I don't think, if Jackson didn't get the fuck off his phone.
Right.
Thinking that he needed to tell people about why they should squat with their knees over their toes because it's better or some shit. And actually go up to this guy and be like, yo, you want to play some pickleball? Isn't that crazy? I mean, that's a better ending than I could have ever.
It's freaking amazing.
But this guy, I mean, look, maybe this guy still would have referred all these people to the pickleball game and that.
Maybe so.
But this guy was upset that he didn't have a partner to play. He was not having a great experience at the club. And the trainer at the club was a real human and went up to him and was like, yo, let's hit the ball around for half an hour.
Oh my god.
And this guy has turned into $4,000 in training revenue that absolutely wouldn't have been there. There's no question that wouldn't have happened.
No way.
And is now such, because he's like a member of the community, is now such an active member of the community that he's referred more people to that pickleball club than any other single member. Isn't that amazing?
You know, most of the time when I'm talking to coaches, I know we got to wrap up the podcast and get to that, but most of the time when I'm talking to, they are, here's an acronym for you, and I just came up with it on the spot.
Oh, good. I like acronyms.
HAS, right? HAS, or H, as they say overseas. Most of the coaches I talk to are trying to build their business with a human avoidance system, right?
Human avoidance system.
Man, can you teach me a human avoidant way to build my business for humans?
Oh my
You know, I'm working on a human
that's so
avoidance
good.
system. You know, I want to do a subscription model so I don't have to engage with humans. I had someone just last week told me, yeah, I'm going to get 100 people into my subscription program at $100 a piece, and man, then I'll really be making money. And I just blinked twice when the coach said this to me on a coaching call. I was like, hey, let me know how that works, right? Let's talk about some other things. But most of the people in our industry these days are trying to avoid humanity at all costs. And just the simple act of engaging with a human can transform the quality and context of your business,
Right.
just because you don't ever know what's going to happen when you just talk to a person. Just
Right.
say something to them. And Jackson, Pickleball Jackson,
Jackson,
which needs to be a Samuel Jackson movie.
Hell yeah.
Pickleball Jackson, motherfucker. Pickleball
Jackson, and I don't got no time for this human avoidance system shit.
Chinese motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane. But yeah, so avoid it. Don't build human avoidance systems out there for your business.
Yeah.
It's not a guarantee, right? But it's so much simpler just to say one or two things to the human that's in the space that you're in, and just see where it goes from there. It's a great way to optimize. Speaking of optimizing, John.
Okay.
New sponsor. And I know this is right up your alley, John, because you talk about this all the time. I know
Yes.
how big you are on turning the screws, threading the needle of human optimization.
It's very important for me to focus on the 2% of human
Absolutely.
health and completely ignore the 98% of what really matters. Yeah, go on.
That's exactly right. So, and as this ad, I was wondering, so Jonathan, are you finding that you're feeling a bit too comfortable at the icky body temperature of 98.6?
Yeah, I hate being warm and comfortable.
Yeah.
I hate it. I feel like it's making me soft.
Absolutely. Maybe you're feeling a little concerned about the fact that you aren't constantly optimizing the shit out of your life.
100%.
Okay.
Well, I wake up in the morning and after figuring out where I am, because I've been woken up 7 times already that night by my children, I think about how can I optimize myself right now. That's
Absolutely.
the first thing I think about.
Well, at PMB Ice Bucket Bath International, we're using cutting edge research in thermal engineering, Jonathan. Not only that, but sub-zero anal constriction to unlock the keys to longevity.
Good.
At Pucker My Butthole Ice Bath Bucket International, no asshole goes unpuckered, John. Trainer assholes, detox assholes. I watched a YouTube video once, assholes, and even that keto asshole from the job. No asshole goes unpuckered and uniced.
Now I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a way for me to grossly overpay for this bucket to put ice in?
John, for as little as $1,200.
Amazing.
As little as $1,200, we can ship a PNB ice barrel bucket for you to dip your unpuckered butthole into and make sure it's fully puckered.
Because I certainly don't want a $25 garbage can from the
bathtub that's conveniently located in your home already. That's for amateurs, John.
Yeah. PNB, why would you put cold water in a bathtub when it's meant for hot water, right?
It's meant for hot water. You definitely don't want ice in there. You'll chafe the bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
$1,200 is a small price to pay, John, because if you're going to piss away money, you want to make sure the piss is ice cold. Good. PMB Ice Bucket Bath International. We're here as a sponsor of the Obvious Choice podcast. Thank you.
All of this having been said, thank you for your inquiry to sponsor a podcast, overpriced ice bath bucket company. I'm not interested. I'm also not interested in sitting in a bucket of ice. I would prefer to remain soft, I guess. Okay. John. Thank you for listening to the Obvious Choice podcast. And I hope you have a very comfortable day where your temperature remains stable. Thank you.